All right, we're on a very tight time frame this afternoon. We're going to have 29 presentations from 11 different academic departments, 2 centers, 2 administrative offices, and from our doctoral program. We're going to have 4 panels on the changing nature of work, the changing workforce, changing workplace, and the changing narrative about work and business. Now, we'll also be doing something this year for the first time. Because of shifting schedules and competing obligations, 4 of the speakers who were supposed to be here with us today were unable to. So in the spirit of any time, any place, anywhere, they videotaped their presentations that we'll hear. And hopefully the technology we'll be talking about will actually work this afternoon. Now, our presenters are also being asked to do something that is virtually impossible for faculty to do, and that's to be brief, very brief. Becky McDougall from our Center for Women in Business has graciously volunteered to be our timekeeper. And so as you'll see, she will flash a couple signs, 1 minute to go, and then done. Please follow Becky's leads. Don't get mad at her, get mad at me. Our goal in this is really to simply provide you with a brief glimpse of the work that's being done across campus. And our hope then is that those presentations you find interesting, you want to explore more fully, we'll have networking breaks and there are poster sessions, so there will be ample opportunity for you to follow up and see what else is going on with those projects. So that's really what I had to say. Very quickly, you know, there are far too many people for me to thank for their support, and without whose efforts this program today would not have taken place. But I'd especially really like to thank all the people in the steering committee, Marcia Cornet, Bill Wiggins, Heikki Topi, and Susan Capolino-Cucuzzo, who we all know really runs this place. They were very central to creating the foundation for this program. I'd also like to thank all of the track chairs and presenters who you'll be meeting throughout the afternoon for their good-natured colleagueship and timely response to my many questions and deadlines that I posed. You've all made my life that much easier. In fact, when I think about the future of work and the nature of what it's like in the workplace, I have to say that one of the reasons why I've enjoyed being here for all of these years is the opportunity to work with colleagues like you, so thank you. So with that, Fred, Linda, and panel 1, would you please come up. Now, one last thing I'm going to ask, when the presenters come, we decided we'd like to have you present at the podium, but also please, just put the water bottles on the floor next to you. I've been told is that it really detracts from the pictures that we'll be taking of the panels. So with that, Fred, Linda.
Fred, did you want to talk for a moment?
Yeah, so while people are sitting, I just wanted to make a few very short comments. I'd like to broaden the scope a little bit because part of the question is not just how do we prepare people to work at Ernst & Young, it's the question of will Ernst & Young even exist in 10 years or 15 or 20. And since my first company was founded with Arthur Anderson as our auditor, I do know to ask that question. And also that it's not about the MBA working at home with the kids, it's also about the cab driver who made a living and supported a family by driving a cab. And in my futurism class last fall, we looked at data that said that in 36 states in this country, the industry that employed the most people was trucking. And those jobs will be gone in 10 years. Because there's no reason to have a truck driver drive between I-495 in Massachusetts and I-5 in California. And that's the world that we need to prepare our students for. And equally, we have to understand that for all the excitement and all the actions, there will be reactions in the business and political arena. And I encourage you all, I know Mark is talking later about history recently, but to read about the Luddite rebellions of the early 1700s and ask how unlikely it is that there will soon be organized destruction of solar panels by people who want to protect other jobs, as there was once organized destruction of weaving mills So with that, I just ask that question broadly and let Linda start to introduce people who hopefully will have the answers.
All righty, so, am I sitting here? Can you hear me? I have the easy job. I get to announce people. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to announce you and read the title. Please go to the podium. That's where the slides are. You'll make your presentation from the podium and then come back, okay? On that note, we're going to start with you, Gary.
Okay.
So let me see if I can make this work. So far, so good. So it's my pleasure to introduce Gary David, The Limitations of Intelligence, the Challenge of Rational Actors in Irrational Worlds.
Thanks for having me. I'll read my comments since I'm a little short on time. The specter of mass displacement and irrelevance once again looms over humanity. Machines are on the march, taking territory at an accelerated pace. Of course, there is nothing new in this story. The very advent of tools introduced the idea of saving labor, working smarter and not harder. It should have been a reasonable expectation that if you continue down this technological path, the idea of labor-saving technology would be an oxymoron, that technology actually saves labor instead of increasing it, or replaces it. Once you begin to save labor, you're moving towards replacing labor, or at the very least initially changing it. Even when not replaced, the tail of technologically based standardization can wag the dog of labor. As sociologists, of which I am one, we of course know this, even though in Weber's iron cage of bureaucracy and rationality, the iron has been replaced with silicon and circuitry. But is all rational? Can we model and foretell what is going to happen in the future based on large-scale analyses and standardized processes? The predictive nature of big data is often predicated on the rationality of the actors under consideration. As April Glaser recently said in Slate.com, quote, "The problem with artificial intelligence isn't that it's getting too smart to take over the world, as Elon Musk likes to warn. The problem, rather, is that AI is too dumb and kind of already has. The biases inherent in the data can result in biased AI, perhaps making AI more human after all." In 2016, quoting again from April Glaser, a study by ProPublica found that popular AI software used to rate criminal defendants' likelihood of committing future crimes, which is then used to help determine bail and sentencing decisions, had extreme racial biases built in. The software called Compass was far more likely to label a black defendant as incorrectly prone to recidivism than a white defendant. So what this is telling us is that context matters. Context will continue to matter. It can also be very elusive and cannot necessarily be neatly written into an algorithm. What the numbers mean depends ultimately on the practices behind their generation. Crime stats do not measure crime, they measure reports of crime. Very different thing. Bad practices in recording and producing data can lead to bad data and eventually bad outcomes and bad decisions. We need context to make data into actionable information, or what I call ethno analytics, the combining of context with data to arrive at decisions that are embedded in localities. The value of the human then relates to its ability to understand humanity, the messiness of human experience, the context that gives rise to actual meaning. The value of humanity and humans also lies in our ability to see new patterns where none previously existed. The ability to connect dots when no numbers are attached to them. And one of the things I like to do in my off time, which I have none, is do adult connect the dots, which have like 1,000 dots with 1,000 numbers, and trying to understand what those dots mean if the numbers weren't there. However, we can only perform those tasks when we have been trained to do them. And this goes back to the previous speaker's central message, that preparing students for particular jobs might be the dead end that the jobs themselves are, and that we'd be better served to prepare them to be thinkers and analytic problem solvers that are able to take in the variety of context that's going to be present to them in a future we can't predict. Thank you.
The second presenter is, Linda Edelman, but that's not me presenting, and Naeimah Alkhurafi, and the paper is The Labyrinth of Women's Entrepreneurship.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi. I'm a doctoral student working with Professor Linda Edelman, and our research examines women's entrepreneurship at a country level. According to the National Association of Women Business Owners, in 2015, there are more than 9.4 million women-owned ventures in the United States, employing 8 million people and generating over 1.5 trillion US dollars in sales. Despite the growth in women entrepreneurship, women are starting businesses at a lower rate than men, with 17% for men and 11% for women. There is evidence that women are less likely to perceive opportunities and have different perceptions of their entrepreneurial capabilities. The objective of our research is to review the literature on women entrepreneurship to better understand the challenges that women face when they pursue a career in entrepreneurship and to find facilitators that help them overcome entrepreneurial barriers. So we systematically examine the obstacles for women entrepreneurs in the literature, and then we highlight efforts to overcome those barriers. For our method, we apply a 5M framework for women entrepreneurship to the recent literature published in 7 top entrepreneurship journals between 2006 and 2017. We find that 63% of the articles addressed barriers to entrepreneurship, with 85% mentioning at least one of the top 5 topics in the framework. We conclude that there are 3 areas which additional programs can help women overcome entrepreneurship barriers, and those 3 areas are education and professional training, mentoring and social support, and access to financing. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to really see the future of research. Let's see if I can do this. Janis Gogan is next. She can't be here. She has a video for her presentation. It's called The Smart Machine and Augmented Reality, a Case for Case Research. All righty. Let's see. Hang on. Oh, Tony, what did I do? No. We had this all planned, just so you know.
And it did work earlier.
It did work earlier. Oh, was it just there and I didn't see it? Okay. Back. Try it there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Janis Gogan. I want to discuss what we know about augmented reality, or AR, why case research is a great way to learn more about it, and how double impact case research can trigger a really useful, broad discussion that will help set a research agenda to investigate augmented reality at work. In VR, which is virtual reality, an individual feels completely immersed in an activity or world. New gaming platforms like Oculus Rift and the Sony PlayStation VR show that virtual reality is important for the future of gaming. AR, augmented reality, isn't fully immersive, but it is quite powerful. For example, I might walk down a real street or inside a real building wearing some smart glasses. Smart, not like these. Or I might gaze into a smart window or mirror. Written or spoken words or numbers and still or video images are available to me right around here, along with the real sights and sounds of my physical environment. Interesting marketing papers describe some example cases, such as a virtual tiger apparently racing toward a bus stop shelter, or a woman virtually trying on makeup or a new dress through the use of a smart mirror. Augmented reality is not just for recreational purposes, though. It's also at work. Wearing smart glasses, a warehouse worker picks items off the shelf, following directions on his virtual screen and in his earbud. A Boeing technician working on aircraft wing wiring assemblies can ask via voice command to check a manual or check a tutorial on his virtual screen, instead of turning away and taking his hands off the assembly to focus on a document. Vendors claim that AR tools like these dramatically improve worker efficiency and effectiveness, but I'm a little skeptical because every IT application brings both benefits and challenges. I call that the law of the double-edged sword of IT. So I want to conduct case studies of augmented reality at work. A case study gives a researcher puzzle pieces to form into a plausible whole or a complete story. I've done quite a bit of case research myself, but last year while I was on sabbatical, I set out to study exemplary double impact case researchers, people who produce high impact theory building papers and journals, as well as outstanding discussion cases and practitioner articles. I came to appreciate something very important. Discussing cases with colleagues and students and executives helped some scholars produce breakthrough ideas. Let's consider Shoshana Zuboff. Back in the 80s, Zuboff conducted 8 case studies about how workers interacted with new computer systems in various jobs. This yielded discussion cases, articles, and her acclaimed book, In the Age of the Smart Machine. I was lucky to co-author 5 cases with Zuboff in the 90s, and now, inspired by her research, I want to study augmented reality at work. Odds are I'll learn about challenges and concerns that are not yet evident in those vendor marketing cases. By watching people work with AR and by interviewing them, I'll gather very helpful data. And then by preparing a few classroom discussion cases and conference papers, I hope to trigger a broader, worldwide discussion among scholars and practitioners who are committed to studying the double-edged sword of augmented reality and its likely effect on the future of work. Anybody want to join me in this case research? If so, let's talk. Again, my name is Janis Gogan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janis. All righty, the next presenter is Annie Witte. Her paper, she's a doctoral student here with us. Her paper, Information Technology and Audit Quality, a research synthesis and suggestions for future research.
It's a mouthful, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you all so much for your time today. So I conducted a literature review on information technology and audit quality. And I start by adopting a really broad definition of IT because I want to holistically consider how does IT influence audit quality. I refrain from actually defining audit quality, and instead I use indicators of audit quality that have been identified by the Center for Audit Quality. There are 4 audit quality indicators, the first being audit firm leadership and tone at the top. The second is engagement team knowledge, experiences, and workload, so how the engagement team actually interacts on the audit and the processes they go through. The third is monitoring, so how does the PCAOB monitor these audit firms and their engagements? The fourth is auditor reporting, which is how and what the final work product is from the audit firm, what they disseminate to their clients and the public. And then during the course of this literature review, I also identified an emerging 5th area of an audit quality indicator being big data and non-traditional audit evidence. So what do we know? The good news is that in general, technology has really expedited the audit process, and it's allowed firms to standardize their methodologies while also meeting assurance compliance. So younger staff is really tech savvy. They're very quick to get their hands around audit support systems in these firms, which is great for the firms because the firms are able to more aptly manage workflows and also disseminate firm expertise through these systems. And finally, big data and audit analytics allow auditors to provide kind of the highest level of assurance that we've seen to date because there are many instances in which these auditors can now actually audit full populations instead of just a sample. However, there are some caveats that we need to be aware of as all of this technology has given rise to many latent risks that we haven't yet fully come to terms with. So one of the first is that audit firms as a hierarchical structure are starting to flatten. We're seeing audit firms actually outsource work to offshore audit centers when it's more simplistic. And different levels of IT skill sets within management can sometimes lead to an actual disrupted tone at the top. Another issue is that within engagement teams, a lot of times communication is now electronic. And a lot of literature shows that this can lead to a reduced level of audit quality versus in-person communication. And younger audit staffers in particular are really prone to instances of technological dominance or over-reliance on decision aids, which can be problematic for audit quality if it subverts their professional judgment. And the final point I want to point out is that the PCAOB has actually identified a lot of instances of secondary audit deficiencies within audit firms, and this means that the clients are often relying or over-relying on client systems that are too complex. They don't quite have a handle on how complex their clients' IT systems have become, which is a problem if the audit firms are trying to actually audit these systems. So how do we move forward? Educators need to really think about how we can integrate more advanced statistics into curricula and also give students greater exposure into data analytic programs. And students should be proactive about seeking out these courses. Practitioners probably have the toughest spot because they're going to need to figure out how they can also appease the client demands by integrating a lot of technology, but also do this safely. So hopefully practice can work more with research and producing a safe and responsible way to conducively integrate IT into the audit. Thank you all so much.
Missing my title.
I know, where's your title? There it is. Sorry about that. All right, this is Lynne Markus, Information and Process Management, keeping humans in the automation control loop. It's harder than you think.
Good afternoon. When advanced automation is under discussion, managers are often advised to keep humans in the loop. We heard that today from Ellen Glazerman. She was explaining the importance of human oversight over advanced technology. An example is self-driving cars. Right now, some of the cars that are available require the drivers to keep their hands on the steering wheel even when the robot is in charge. Another example is automated trading, where securities trading, where we create the job called anti-trader, whose job is to watch out for algorithms doing what they're not supposed to, and then activating the kill switch. These examples illustrate what I believe to be a broad trend in business today toward the creation of business processes that have two characteristics. The first is that the automation and not people are doing the coordination, the pacing, and the management of knowledge content for the jobs that humans perform. The second characteristic is that humans, even expert knowledge workers, have limited capabilities to control the automation or to intervene effectively. By capability here, what I mean is knowledge, skill, opportunities, and incentives. If humans do not have capabilities with respect to automation, they do not have the conditions of moral responsibility with respect to the work actions they take. They are, in fact, robots. I believe that more and more our businesses are creating human robots. The automation of mortgage underwriting, home mortgage underwriting, is a case in point. I've studied this for a number of years. Automated underwriting was introduced in 1994 and diffused very rapidly. Among the very many players in the mortgage industry, it's a very dispersed and fragmented industry, or at least it was in the beginning. It's now highly concentrated. Anyway, the technology was introduced to reduce the risk, or actually prevent mortgage defaults, and it was intended for use by expert underwriters. By the time of the mortgage crisis, automated underwriting was used by mortgage brokers, real estate brokers, and even consumers who used online websites like lendingtree.com. Needless to say, this automated underwriting technology did not have the outcome of reducing defaults, and in fact, it may have created them. I believe there's a broad trend toward putting advanced automation in the hands of people, but people who do not have the conditions of moral responsibility for their actions. I believe we're making people into robots. The questions I have for you are, is this really the kind of world we want to live in? And if not, what can we do and what should we do about it? Thank you.
Okay, our next presenter, Nurik from the Management Department. You ready? Good enough managers in future organizations.
Thank you. I'll start talking before I get to the microphone. Tony told me I had 4 minutes, and I told him it takes me 4 minutes to put my pants on in the morning, so we'll see how far this goes. The cultural observer Daniel Pink, about a dozen years ago, in writing this book called A Whole New Mind, was looking into the future and saying what kind of managers are going to be most effective. And he said that the managers of the future were, he labeled, creators and empathizers. And this coincided with about 40 years of experience that I had teaching in this general area of how do you create an effective manager, an effective leader. And I came up with the idea of the good enough manager. The good enough manager is based on actually on a psychological concept of actually a concept from psychoanalysis called the good enough mother or parent, who creates this precarious balance between enough structure and enough autonomy and creates something called a good enough facilitating environment where people feel free to do their best work while being supervised. Fortunately, the acronym for good enough manager is a gem. So the managers of the future, or the most effective managers of the future, are going to be gems. And as you can see, if the slide is up there, my definition of a good enough manager is one who is confident working with things that we've been talking about already: fluidity, complexity, uncertainty, building and maintaining very, very effective relationships, and facilitating autonomy, maturity, creativity, and growth. How do they do this? Well, I sought out to study this a number of years ago, actually. I had people respond to a web-based survey. I got over 1,000 responses. I analyzed the responses. People writing and telling stories about the best managers and the worst managers that they worked for. The best managers overwhelmingly were considered mentors and teachers. They were relationship builders, and they were models of integrity. They created environments where people could actually feel free enough to make some mistakes, not over and over again, but make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. Just to give you an example of one of these stories, sort of the gold standard that I said of a good enough manager, the best manager I have worked for was one who gave me autonomy and trusted me to perform. At first, I had to prove myself, my capabilities, because he had assumptions based on my age and lack of experience. He did not give step-by-step instructions. He shared his vision and shared his goal. If I ever got close to a guardrail, he made it comfortable to approach him with questions. Instead of giving me the answer, he would ask more questions so that I could think up a solution myself. I was performing within the guardrails. My boss would trust me to execute on the vision and achieve the goal. There were countless stories along these same themes where the manager set the vision, set the boundaries, and then allowed enough autonomy for the employee to do their best work. The question then becomes, are these just special people, these gems that walk among us and we just have to find them, or can you actually create them? I've been teaching this stuff for almost 40 years. And I think it is entirely possible to become a gem. I've given some of the qualities that I believe. I've put them in the order of 4 C's: capacity, competence, character, commitment. You can see that empathy, managing with emotional intelligence, the ability to let go of one's own perfectionism that gets in the way of actually allowing people to do their work. Competence in interpersonal skills. It's something that I just call character, ethics, doing the right thing, working according to values, and something that Ellen was talking about before, the passion and the purpose in the organization. Thank you.
And our last presenter for this panel, in no particular order, Heikki Topi, Changing Individual Competency Requirements, the Case of Computing.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here to tell briefly about work that is taking place by a large number of professional and academic societies from around the world related to competencies specifically in the area of computing. Obviously, what we are seeing right now in every single conversation regarding computing and non-computing topics, as we saw earlier today, there is discussion about automation, robotics, digitalization, analytics-driven business processes, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, Internet of Things, sensor technologies. And all of these related to this idea of building and integrating intensively automated technologies, digital technologies into work processes, with both benefits and disadvantages, as we have already heard today a couple of times. But one of the key questions in this context is the question of how does this change affect the competencies that are required to make this world a reality and then work effectively in this world? And this question is, we believe, particularly important in the context of computing as a profession. And so major academic and professional societies in the area of computing in the world have launched a project called CC 2020, Computing Curricula 2020, to address the question about the competencies required by graduates of core computing disciplines. Competencies as seen as integration of knowledge, skills, and attitudes or dispositions. The challenge here is this. We have been looking at a number of different types of professionals in the area of computing who are looking at these questions from different perspectives. And the attempt is to try to build a common language, common way of identifying what the competencies are across these different dimensions of computing. What makes this particularly challenging is the fact that even with these relatively closely related disciplines and professional fields, the language that is used to analyze these competencies is quite different, and finding the common currency is genuinely difficult. But we believe that if we are able to do that, then our ability to understand what is truly and genuinely core in terms of competencies within computing becomes more possible. And even in a fast-changing world, we will have better chances of understanding what it means to educate professionals to this world that is as difficult to predict as we have heard many times already today. And we have formulated some hypotheses regarding the change that takes place in computing, believing that importance of foundational individual competencies continues to increase. Technical competencies become deeper and deeper. High demands for those who design infrastructures, and competencies related to data analysis and analytics will become very important for everybody. And we will be testing these and other related hypotheses. Thank you very much.
All right. Can you join me one more time in a round of applause for our panel one?
And I would like to add my thanks for keeping us right on time. Nicely done. At this point, I'd like to have our second panel come up. Will be chaired by Donna Maria Blanchero, Deb Pine, and Trish Foster. We'll be looking at the changing workforce.